So yeah, Greg runs his own consultancy agency, focusing on Fabric and Power BI, and he's just come back from a lovely trip to Sydney, and he wants to share with us what he learned and how it went. Like I said, feel free to ask questions as we go along. People online as well. Otherwise, enjoy.
Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. Most of you know me. Some of you don't. If you don't, I'm Greg, as Kelly said. I'm a local Power BI MVP, and yes, as she mentioned, I recently went to Sydney last week. I was in Sydney for the Gartner Data and Analytics Summit, and Kelly said, "Hey, do you want to do a talk?" And I was like, "Sure, why not?" And so I threw some slides together very hastily. Can I just confirm online? Can you see my screen? That is
yes.
white. Can they see it? Yes. Michelle, can you see it? Can you give me like a thumbs up, Michelle, if you can see that? Oh, no, you can see it. Oh, you're on someone. Okay, great.
I'm online too.
All right, we're ready to go. Just to prove I was in Sydney, here's me in Sydney. I was at the ICC, which is the big conference centre there. It's a nice place, big event place. If you haven't been there, it's definitely worth going to a conference there. They've got very good facilities. Basically, what I wanted to cover in this session is basically just like 3 or 4 of the main sessions that they went through. We're going to have a mini comp right now. You're going to get the comp. Costs like $5,000 to go, but you get to go for free. So no, I'm just going to cover like probably the key takeaways. There was a lot of really interesting content, a lot of really relevant stuff to us. Every single slide had the word AI on it, so get ready. It's going to be an AI related thing. But I've just picked out 4 of the, I think 4, maybe 3, I think 4 of the key kind of sessions that I went to and that I can kind of speak to. And then I think Ray's kind of picked out the best slides out of those bits and wanted to just kind of raise a few interesting points. So happy to have a discussion. Feel free to come off mute if you're online. If you want to heckle, go ahead. I'm good at hecklers. So first I wanted to cover the opening keynote. This is how they started. Bang. Because I think this is, and there was 2 very, very scary slides. They use this to kind of set the context of about how people feel at the moment when it comes to AI and data and analytics in general.
Not just about presenting a data science to the Melbourne.
What was that? No, this isn't how I feel right now. This is very much about the kind of current state of the industry, and I thought it was an interesting way to start the conference. This is a classic kind of context setting thing that you do in presentations, where you scare everybody first and then try and create the problem so that you can then frame everything as a solution afterwards. And so classic sales technique by Gartner. Well done. But I think it does kind of reflect the kind of state of the industry a lot at the moment. Is that there's a lot of uncertainty in the world, particularly in the data platform world, and honestly, it moves so fast, it's incredibly hard to keep up. It's really, really difficult. So I pulled out some of the key pieces from the keynote. Data availability and data quality is the #1 obstacle for implementing AI. This is very much a theme throughout the whole conference. It all comes back to the data, as we know, and that is very much reflected in what people are talking about at the highest levels. So at the CDAO level and at the CIO level, that's what kind of is kind of the frame for where people are up to when it comes to AI. And the #1 roadblock to data and analytics success is that company culture is not data driven. And so, I mean, this room will know well that this is like, yeah, no shit Sherlock. But it is one of those things that is still kind of looms large over the industry, I guess, is this idea of how do we build data driven cultures and what do we do? Like I don't think anyone's really cracked the formula for it, and it's still something that troubles organizations today is that it's just going to be a constant kind of idea that is going to be, something we have to deal with a lot. I thought this is interesting. They were talking a little bit about like the tech stack that we need to consider, and that everything is basically, they call it the trust stack now, right? Everything is around trust. And this is framed by the idea that AI is going to be taking over the world soon, and they're going to be, querying every bit of data that you have in every single location that you have. And how do you build that technical stack that creates trust in the organization? And that requires a lot of different pieces, right? You need data ops and FinOps, you need platform ops, you've got the underlying infrastructure of the platform, your concept of AI-ready data, and I'm going to go into what is AI-ready data because I covered that in the session, and I thought it was a really interesting session, is how do we make data ready for AI? The concepts of the standard concepts, analytics and BI, data science and machine learning, and of course the AI piece, and then also this concept of metadata and how we manage our data is a really important piece. And so there's a lot of kind of uncertainty about exactly what's going to be coming next. So how do we lay the foundation for data now to ensure that we've got all the things that we need? They spoke a little bit about how to get there, and I'm skipping over all of the examples and all of the things that the 3 hours of crap that they went through. So I'm just trying to give you the money slides here. But essentially, they talk about this idea of trust equals value, the journey to business outcomes, building that trust. So that was kind of what I was talking about, is that it's very much about trust, and that trust is one of the key foundational pieces that we as kind of data professionals are going to have to deal with in the next kind of 1 to 2 years, if not right now, because that's what's going to, the AI foundation lays the foundation for AI. Around modular and open architectures, reusable data products. There's a lot of talk about data products at the conference, and they spoke about what are data products and how do you kind of implement them, which I thought was interesting. And then what do you do in terms of exploring AI agents and that kind of stuff as well. But then very much a lot of focus on the people side of this, which is that there's a whole lot of skilling pieces that we need to do in this room and online as data professionals, because there's a whole other set of capabilities that we kind of need to be across. And so a lot of that is sort of preparing people for that transformation, which is coming down the line in terms of AI, is that there's a bit of reskilling that needs to potentially happen as well, and that's in this space. So it was an interesting keynote. Certainly laid the foundation, put big red scary slides up for everybody to worry about, and then they kind of did the rest of the thing.
Did they present these as sort of parallel journeys rather than anything just sort of left to right?
I think it was. I think it's has to happen, either all at once or in parallel. I don't think there was any kind of sense of that. I don't know, Arthur, did you get a sense of? Arthur was at the conference, so now I'm just calling him in there.
You brought him.
I've done quite a few data governance kind of related sessions, and yeah, that was exactly what Greg was talking about. Yeah, it didn't follow any journeys, or it was more about.
No, we should say it's more the way that this slide's presented as to whether it's, it is what you should be doing in I guess just different pillars at the same time, rather than, is there a sort of sequence to them?
Is there I didn't get a sense of a sequence. It was more like an all at once.
Yeah.
An all at once thing has to happen across a few different areas.
No, that's fine.
Can I ask?
Yeah.
What specific changes do they recommend for preparing your data for AI?
I've got a whole series of slides.
That's coming up.
Yeah. Because that was one of the things I was really interested in as well. Yeah. All right. So we skip to the next session, which was on data storytelling. A lot of this stuff, this is an area that I'm intensely interested in. I love data storytelling stuff. They talk about this in the context of AI now. So they go, hey, you've got to be able to get data storytelling, and now you've got AI that has to tell data stories, all this kind of business. But I liked the framing here, so I wanted to just cover it. This is something that the way that they kind of frame it is something that I'll use in the future as well. Essentially, they broke it down, data storytelling down into kind of 3 main areas. The first one is, what are we looking at, right? So, and I really like the kind of guidance here that no visualization goes undescribed. Like that to me, like I'm doing this kind of work at the moment in an organization where we're trying to set the standards for data visualization, like what our data is presented. And the concept of saying of just adding explainers to every single visualization actually makes a huge difference in terms of how people can interpret that. So I kind of really like that first piece. So that's really about visualization. And then, so you create the visual, you create a graph, and then you put a narrative across that graph, right? This is what this graph shows. And I think that's a really important piece. But more than that, then we move to the next phase, which is, why is this happening? You know, like, why does this thing go up or down, or what can you explain the rise or the fall of this particular chart? And so this is around that next piece out of data visualization, which is insight to action. So we're not just visualizing and showing them a number, we're giving them something so they can take action from that number. So I thought that was an interesting way to frame it. And then finally, what are we going to do about it? So this is really now into that action and impact phase. And so I've kind of matured my thinking around data storytelling. It used to be all the data value stream, which I was always like, from entry to insight. I used to call it the data insight value stream, from entry to insight. And now they say it's from data to insight to action to impact, right? So it's not just about creating insights anymore. It's about creating insights that people can act on, and actually that those actions actually make a difference to the business. And so you're really thinking about that end product for the business, as opposed to just building analytics for analytics' sake, which everybody's guilty of, just throwing a bunch of charts up there, right? So I really like that kind of frame, and there was a good piece around that. They had some nice slides in this presentation around bridging the gap between data experts and stakeholders. On the left-hand side, the data experts speak in one language. On the right-hand side, your stakeholders speak in a completely different language. And so data storytelling is the intersection between those two worlds. And so I thought that was kind of cool. But also, being Gartner, they throw up a lot of stats around what the current state of the industry is. And they're sort of saying that data and analytics leaders overwhelmingly think that they need to improve their data storytelling, which I think most of us here can probably relate to. Spoke a little bit about the idea of an analytics data story actually having a plot, as opposed to just trying to throw a visual up there and looking at the different possible outcomes. And that plot is not necessarily a linear plot; it's more a kind of circular thing. There's a lot of feedback loops happening in this space. It's not necessarily we started here and then we got to here. It's we started here and then we tried something and it didn't work and then we went back and so there's that kind of idea, which I thought was quite cool. There's some recommendations here from that session, which is really around looking at data storytelling, evaluating, experimenting with your data storytelling capabilities, keep abreast of your generative AI advancements. So the idea here is that generative AI is going to be telling the story soon, right? So that you're going to have these agents that are actually going to be telling the story of the data on your behalf. And there's already things out there, Notebook LM and other and virtual agents that are starting to do this now. You can create a podcast over your data. You can create an agent that tells people about your data. And that's a much more natural way for people to interact with data. There's going to be natural voice coming into these platforms soon. And so we need to think about how those platforms are going to interact with our data and how they're going to tell the story of that data. And so I thought this is a kind of an interesting piece here around how to do that. That idea of kind of human AI kind of interaction over the top of this data. So that was a cool session. That was session number 2. Session number 3 was around Agile Analytics Delivery Model. So this was a session that it's really, the full name of it was like how to create an Agile Analytics Delivery Model without sacrificing governance, right? And the whole piece around this was, first they looked at the history of kind of our analytics kind of models. And this is, the standard kind of, how it's been for many years, which is you've got a bunch of on-premises data sources, you do some ETL into a cube of some kind or a data warehouse, and then you have a semantic layer, and then you have a BI platform on the right-hand side, and people have their scheduled reports, and they have their dashboards and all the rest of it. And that idea of it like a centralized era of self-service. Then the next generation of that which apparently people have been doing, is the decentralized era of self-service. So this is the idea that we have it's more lakehouse style architectures. You've got different, more agile delivery in terms of the way that these solutions are built. Now, I looked at this architecture and I was like, I don't know too many people that actually got this far. You know, like I know a lot of people are in that kind of traditional space, but yeah, this seemed optimistic to me, but it might reflect the American market. I'm not sure. But really, the point that I was saying is that how do we deliver these kind of when we talk about decentralized era of self-service, we're really talking about things like mesh and federated analysts, right? And things like that. So what you've got is a centralized model, and then you've got people out there in the world in your organization, particularly in larger organizations, they're just going to be out there analyzing data all on their lonesome in their Excel or whatever they want to do, right? And so how do you keep control of that? How do you govern that layer, but still maintain, like build an analytics model that's kind of works for everybody? So you have a centralized and decentralized teams that can do that. And this is really about resolving the never-ending debate between control and freedom. In the Microsoft world, we call this discipline at the core and flexibility at the edge, which is my favorite way to describe this, right? So Microsoft used that in their case study for when they implemented Power BI originally. This is many moons ago. They implemented this idea of discipline at the core. So everybody at the core, that's where their traditional data warehouses were. There was a lot of structure and rigor and governance at the middle. And they needed that to be that way, right? Because you can't get numbers wrong. There's that kind of space. But when Power BI came out, they realized that it allowed them to create more flexibility at the edge. So there's idea that they could federate some of those analytics responsibilities off to self-service users who could do this stuff for themselves. And you want to give them as much freedom as you possibly can, but still maintain that governance layer. And so it's actually this kind of push-pull relationship happens between the centralized teams and the decentralized teams. And every organization goes through this and literally dealing with this right now. And so we need a data architecture and organizational model that allows for both. We need to be able to have that discipline at the core, but we can't, if we go too rigid and we lose the flexibility at the edge, then our organization becomes stagnant. If we go too flexible, then our organization gets sued or, you know, goes out of business or gets a regulatory, issue. And so it's a balance between those two things, and creating that kind of balance is really important. In terms of the framework that they're recommending now I've seen a million different options for how you could potentially do this, and they've got this idea of center of excellence and guilds and all sorts of things that have come up in the past. They talk about the idea of a self-service analytics franchise. So now we're at McDonald's. So the idea is that you have both a centralized and decentralized structure. So you have your center of excellence in the middle, and then each of your teams have their analytics capability inside their domain. And those teams are multidisciplinary teams. So you have technical skills, analytical skills, and domain SMEs all within that team. And you use this kind of prototype first governance framework. So try it out, see if it works. If it doesn't work in a safe way, iterate on that, continue to go forward, and then publish that up into the discipline core area, right? The idea is that you then play that out to each department. So you've got an open analytics franchise in each area, and each one of those areas has their own set of people around that. Now, I think kind of bringing this back to kind of the Microsoft world, the thing that really, really helps with this that I've noticed, and I think and I'm really looking forward to implementing it in one of our customers at the moment, is CI/CD and data ops capability. So this is around if you've got because Power BI and Fabric now support CI/CD and data ops properly, almost, with the exception of a couple of really annoying things. That means that you can do this kind of model in a much easier way, because what you can do is you can have decentralized repositories, or you can have a centralized repository, and you set up your PBIP files they all sync back to the centralized repository, and you can set up what have been like development practices that were traditionally used by kind of app development teams. Things like you have a federated analyst go away, build some stuff. They branch that off the main branch of your repository, and then they create a pull request to bring that back in, and then your centralized team actually check the pull request and make sure that it's okay, and then publish and then approve that for publishing. You can set up automated testing, you can do all that kind of stuff. And so I think this kind of federated analytics kind of teams model is not possible without good CI/CD and code repository type disciplines and good development practices. And so that's something that I thought the two kind of are hand in hand at the moment in the Microsoft world, given that Power BI and Fabric are both pretty much there in terms of creating a CI/CD kind of space.
Did they mention anything about data mesh?
Yeah, lots of talk about data mesh. This is also kind of supporting that data mesh architecture in the back end, and so this specific presentation wasn't about data mesh as such, but data mesh is kind of this idea, and I think we talk a little bit about data mesh later. But yeah, data mesh is that kind of overarching kind of idea that kind of it's like the architecture that Fabric's kind of built on. The idea of having domains and these kind of decentralized teams and that kind of thing is very much in line with data mesh as a concept. Yeah. A couple of interesting stats around contents like catalogs and certification, which is something that is also natively supported in Fabric and Power BI is most people don't have a catalog and most people don't use certification like right now, and that's probably a reflection of some of the tools that people use, but also a fact that we just don't have that governance layer generally in the industry. So I thought that was an interesting presentation. The idea of data franchises, I think that kind of sits in line with, I don't know what I would call it, but they probably would call it data mesh right before, but now the Gartner at least are calling it franchises. So I thought that was really interesting. Build that globally consistent brand, recruit those business leaders. This is always going to be about the change management piece. You need to have a lot of meetings to make these sorts of things happen in larger organizations. So that's something that is something I thought was interesting. All right. I think this is the last session. Ready your data for AI, save the best for last. So this session was about, well, okay, AI is coming. What do we do to our data to make it ready? Because we can't, AI kind of doesn't work right now. Like you can get it to do, there's fancy, like interesting demos out there, but the real coalface in the real world, it's very, very difficult to get like an agent to do anything useful with data. And that's because the data is just so terrible. And so what do we know about AI now that means that we can prepare for the data in the future, which is going to be something that's really, really crucial. So the first thing they did, like always, Gartner with the stats, investments in AI-ready data is the #1 priority right now for all data leaders. This is the thing that they're thinking about because they can't really do anything else. All the other things are kind of out of their control, but this is something they can control. And so, how do we prepare our AI data? How do we invest in it so that we can become AI ready? And I think there's a lot of hype around AI and how it kind of works, but all of the models kind of work the same, right? ChatGPT works pretty much the same as Copilot. It all uses the same model, and so does Claude, and so does all the other ones, right? And that's actually the easy part because large language models work basically the same way across the board. There's different cool ones that do different special features, but they all basically work the same way. The difficult part is the data. And that's the thing that's actually the differentiator between you and another organization is actually the quality of your data and what it looks like and how well that AI can kind of interact and interpret that data. And so this is a big deal. And I think it's something that's probably very relevant to our industry and something that we all need to be kind of prepared for as one of the big initiatives that are going to be coming out of organizations pretty soon. So what do they cover? What does AI data ready mean? What are the risks and challenges, and how should data management evolve to support these requirements? They're the key things that they covered on this one. So what does it mean? Really, they basically said AI ready data is basically the high level presentation of it is that create data that fully represents the sources. This is the concept of the data being fully representative of the source that is created on it, and you do that through ensuring that your data is aligned, that it's governed and has context, and that it's continuously qualified. So the big message was data is not AI ready. Data isn't a stamp of approval. You don't say this data is AI ready now. Click. It's a continuous process of constantly checking that data and reviewing it and refining it and improving it. And so it's not a one, okay, let's go and make our data AI ready, and then the project ends and the data is AI ready. It's a continuous piece. And that's something that's really they hammered that idea home throughout the day. So basically, what does this mean? Like, what are the three areas that mean? So when we say align data, that means look at the accessibility of the data. So can the AI access the data, or whatever? Is it available for people or for AI? What's the structure? The semantic model, probably the most important piece. I'm always going to harp on about modeling because that's my big area, but I think that was reinforced throughout the conference, is that semantic layer is going to be the most important layer, and I think that puts Power BI and Fabric in a really good spot, to be honest, because they've always had very strong semantic modeling. That's been, the whole way that Power BI was built originally was based on a Kimball star schema semantic model, and that is now all the other tools are starting to catch up. Databricks is trying to come up with their own semantic modeling tools, and so forth. And so the vendors that have semantic modeling are ahead in this space, and it's proving to be a differentiator across the board. Obviously, the accuracy and quality. Yes, Max. Yeah.
Yeah. So with this modeling, what about other models like Vault, Data Vault?
Yeah, I think we're in a time where everyone's experimenting with how effective different models are for different AI experiences. Now, I haven't seen anybody do anything work around Data Vault and whether it's more or less accurate or better than semantic models. I would say that Data Vault, if I had to guess, is probably less accurate because it's all third normal form, right? And it's very highly denormalized, so most Data Vault will probably be harder for AI to read, I guess, but I don't know for sure. And so I think that's a whole piece of work that needs to happen, is that it looks like most people are saying that star schema semantic modeling is the way to go, but I don't know for sure.
Facts and dimensions.
Facts and dimensions, yeah. So yeah, it's a really interesting space. This is the space that I'm highly interested in at the moment, and I think I'm going to be doing a lot of work on trying to figure out myself, because I think this is an area that's got a lot of opportunity in it, particularly for people who are working in data platform. This is an area that I think is really cool. So that alignment piece is around trust, fairness, and diversity. So data trust, again, that came up through everything. Annotation and labeling, like there's a whole piece around synonyms and labeling, and how do you make your data ready and all that kind of stuff. Data lineage, and then the concept of graph as well. So creating graph databases and using those. So there's all these kind of contextual awareness stuff that you need to think about with these AIs. It's not really just going to be about creating a set of tables and making it clean and so that humans can read it. This is now about creating that inbuilt context. So that semantic model, again, becomes really important, so that the AI has that ability to kind of navigate what does this mean and how is it related to other entities inside the organization.
Do you feel there's anything outside just good data practices that they're saying to do here?
I think that I think there's a slide later a little bit on there's good data practices that you start with, and that kind of is foundation one. And then there's kind of the next generation of data practices, which is a little bit around semantic modeling and tagging. And then there's some other stuff, and we'll get to it. But then there's AI specific data practices that no one's doing. And that's what we need to learn. This is the skilling part, is that there's our standard good data practices, and then a whole other set of skills and practices that we need to learn and gather around how that's going to work. And so, yeah, this is why I find that really interesting.
just one thing to add here. As you said, that semantic layer will sort of become more and more important. I saw a post on LinkedIn, I think a few days ago, where about the TMDL thing. I'm not a big
Yeah.
Power BI person, so I'm not
Yeah.
really sure. But they said that you can essentially, it's like converting because LLMs understand Markdown better than anything else. So it's a
Correct.
good idea to convert all your documents and data into Markdown, especially the unstructured data that you have.
Yeah.
And similarly, but what do you do for semantic models? And that's where sort of TMDL or something like that comes in, where you convert your entire semantic model into a script.
Yeah.
And then with practice and with more and more training, LLMs will get better and better at understanding those scripts.
Yeah.
So essentially, that's, I think, also along the same tangent of making data more AI ready.
100%. And you
Yeah.
can see Microsoft are doing this all over the shop.
Yeah.
In terms of building these pieces in that are going to prepare that. So TMDL, for those of you that don't know, is a markup language that's a new thing in Power BI now, where your data model is described in readable language, right? And it makes it much easier. It's similar to YAML. It's much easier to diagnose. You can do it's for CI/CD, merging and branching type scenarios. And what this means is that these things become much easier to interpret for something like an AI. And you can see why Microsoft are coming down that kind of path, is to be able to do that. Similar with PBIP and the new report view, PBIR views as well. And so all of these things are kind of designed for that space. And then you can see across more broadly across the landscape, Microsoft are implementing things like MCP servers, like across everything, across Microsoft Learn. And so MCP servers are so that AI agents can talk to documents in the web and be orchestrated and organize access and all that kind of stuff. And so there's all this foundational layer of infrastructure and pieces going into these tools that is preparing for this next generation of AI kind of ready analytics. So on the governance side, lots of around AI standards, governance, data sharing, regulatory and compliance, accountability and responsibility. So we just have to get the governance layer right in out. We can't be lazy about governance anymore, because AI is going to very quickly reveal that laziness to the world. And so we need people like Arthur to help us out with that. So user training certification, and then across the continuous improvement side is around assessing consistency, validation, verification, regression testing, automation testing. And so you can see that this is like good practices with data, and then really good practices with data, and then the next generation of practices with data. We all need to get across how they're going to work. And of course, no one's doing it at the moment, and it's very difficult in terms of readiness. Only 43% of people are saying that they're even kind of functional in a lot of this area, and so there's a big kind of opportunity there, I guess, for data people to step up and really do a lot here. Lots of talk around metadata management, master data management, all of these kind of things as well. How manual are you compared to the next generation of metadata management is going to be fully automated and AI driven, and so there was a bit of talk around how managing that data is going to be a big piece, and then talking about those good standard data practices. They're good, but they're too slow and too rigid. So this is coming back to that idea of kind of discipline and core and flexibility at the edge, that you need flexibility in some of these systems for AI to be able to speak to them. And so that standard data lake architecture, which many of us are either looking at or moving to or have moved to, is potentially still too structured and too slow for AI, right? And so there's potentially some issues there. So that means this whole idea about how we manage data has to potentially evolve to this next generation for being able to create AI-ready data. So yeah, this concept of kind of evolving is this one here. But there's always going to be those evergreen, continuous, good data management practices that we need to do. But there's also these kind of AI-specific data innovations that we need to also potentially skill up in. I thought this was a good little slide on assessing your.
Just ask one thing.
Yeah, mate.
So with the AI ready data, are there specific rules that you can say, okay, my data is now AI ready? So suppose I have a data in my
Yep.
organization.
Yeah.
Are there specific checks or rules which says, okay,
Yeah,
it's ready, it's passed?
there will be, but it's not a pass-fail thing. So your data is never ready. Like you can't just say this. Here's some data. This is ready. The idea here is that it's a continuous improvement process, and that there's no one time where it's ready. It's that you need to build practices into your organization that are constantly working on this data to constantly improve it, tag it, improve the context, improve the pieces. And so this concept of AI ready isn't a certification of data. It's a practice of continuous improvement.
If they're saying that, data lake and medallion in the architecture and all that is too slow, have they said what the better solution is, or have we got to go out and find that?
Figure it out.
That's the homework.
Yeah, that's your homework. Yeah, I think what they're saying is that there's AI teams looking to implement AI right now, and they're running up against roadblocks against these architectures, which are the kind of current state of data architecture in terms of speed and agility and all that kind of stuff. And it's still too slow. And so there's a whole other generation of things coming. And then this will, of course, get fully optimized and automated by AI at some point anyway. And so to what extent, we don't know. But just know that there's a whole other problem over the hill that will keep us all in a job for a while, which is the next generation of AI, data readiness to meet these demands of AI in the future. I thought this is an interesting thing, is that it's not just about generative models, right? It's about all the different types of AI. So don't get fully hung up on language models. There's also just all of those different workloads and the different way that you deliver those use cases. You might use different techniques, and they're good for different things. So I thought that was a cool little slide. And then this is talking about those foundational data management practices, our core practices that we know. So data warehouses and data marts and data lakes and lake houses and data quality and data governance and data prep and data catalogs and data lineage. That's just level one, right? And then you get into the next level, which is around data fabric and observability and metadata management. So these are things that I think, particularly in the Australian market, where there's a lot of people who are nowhere near this, right? They're still in that foundational space, getting the core pieces right. And there's this whole other piece that is coming down the line in terms of advanced data management, that implementing data products, data mesh. So these are all things that we need to consider for future state. But then there's the AI specific pieces to actually make that data AI ready, which are things like data labeling, using synthetic data enrichment, bias mitigation, chunking, vector embedding. So there's vector databases and all this kind of stuff that we haven't even touched on. And then engineering, prompt engineering and feature engineering. Like, these are AI specific practices that someone's got to learn. So I think there'll be work for a while. So
And then I can't retire.
can't retire just yet. Yep. So a little bit of talk about identify, like, how to evolve your data management practices, and then and this is where that concept of there's a lot of skilling to be done, right? Is that there's all these extra pieces around AI that we need to learn that is for this next generation of AI. To build this next generation of AI ready data, we need these extra skills to be able to help us do that. And then they were very big on data product managers as a concept. So data products is still a thing. That was the thing they spoke about at the last Gartner conference, was everything's data products. And this is before AI, and now it's data products with AI. And so you have these data product managers that are in your business, kind of helping you do that. So here's a recommendation slide. Make data management an AI strategic priority, metadata management a data management priority, developing AI-ready data practices supported by metadata management, data observability, data and analytics governance. So these are that kind of next generation of pieces we need to put in, or the advanced pieces. Those cross-functional teams comes up again to support AI data ready requirements that include data product managers, and then learn and expand the use of AI data by leveraging metadata that comes out of the AI processes continuously. So that's that idea of continuous improvement of our data, and then learning and expanding and redoing and all the rest of it. And that's the end. Connect with me on LinkedIn if you haven't already. But thanks very much, everybody.
They cover anything about protecting your data when you're starting to use it to build, guardrails around things there? Or,
Greg's like, that's a whole other presentation.
There was almost certainly a whole other presentation. Did you have something on that?
There was actually around tooling actually, and they had this quadrant where they say what are the best tools for you to classify, say, the confidentiality of the data. You can actually scan your data and identify PI or any data that's highly confidential, and you can create those controls. And they kind of mentioned quite a few tools there in the quadrant that can help with this journey and create those remediation steps for you to get there. And yeah, definitely with Copilot, there's like extra features coming up now where you can customize the bots and create like your custom bots, and you can, I would say, filter what type of data do you want to, say for example, like Copilot to access. And there's lots of talking about, like about confidentiality there, but they didn't want to keep like a lot of examples, but there's definitely like discussion on
pilots
tooling and
still one of those ones of if you're not careful, then your organizational data ends up going into the learning of the models, and it's there for picking if somebody interrogates it in the right way.
Yeah, there's a huge number of examples of people who you do SharePoint security by obfuscation, right? I saw a session at a Microsoft conference about this, where they were just like, everybody in the past has just kind of said, well, as long as you don't have a link to it, then you can't see it, and therefore it's fine. And then, but someone, the CEO just does a share all link to the payroll, and then sends it to one person so that they can look at it. And I know that because I did this, I'm the CEO of my company, and I did this today to send sensitive data to somebody. And so that security by obfuscation doesn't work anymore, because then somebody says, what's the payroll of my colleague? And Copilot goes, oh, here's a publicly shared document that I found that has that information in it, and here's all the information you could possibly want. And so the fact that, just because you're sitting on Microsoft Graph, which is the underpinning kind of technology that allows for all of this to happen, it means that security model is also exposed, and that we have a whole piece of work there to protect that data. And that's not just in SharePoint, but that's across your whole landscape, whether that's your databases or whatever, is that anything you put AI over is going to be able to surface every single piece of that information that it has access to. And so that's why we're all talking about governance today, because that's the big piece, right? So, yeah.
Yep. Right. So did they talk about guardrails around AI, with job losses and, changes to organizations and, a lot of disruption in organizations? They talk about guardrails some people are talking about it. There are a lot of places in Europe and all that who are looking at it.
In the American market, they really swing for the fences. Arthur and I were talking about this on the way over, is that they go really hard because they want to try to get a competitive advantage over everybody else. And so AI comes out and they're like, go, go, go. It doesn't matter. We're a bank. Let's put AI over it. And then there's all these horror stories about how the things have gone wrong. And, like a car sales bot sells a Chrysler for $1 or whatever. And, there's all these examples that come out of the market where people have gone too hard too early because they haven't put those guardrails in place. And like this whole conference was about governance for that reason. Like literally, I've never been to a Gartner data and analytics conference where they talk about governance more than they did this time. Normally governance is one session and everybody's like, I'm not going to the governance session, boo. Like it's what it's like. That's what the attitude's been around data governance in the past. And now it's like front and center of every single piece of thing that I see not just out of Gartner, out of every single tech platform, out of every single Microsoft presentation. They're all talking about data governance, security, guardrails, and how do we protect ourselves from these things. And so, yeah, it's a massive consideration. And then, yeah, more broadly speaking, around kind of the change management piece for people, I think that there's a lot of big red scary slides fear in the market around job losses and all the rest of it. But I just, looking at the future requirement that we need to build over the next 3 to 5 years, I can't see that being anything to worry about in the short term, because there's just so much work to do. But maybe I'm wrong, who knows? Maybe AI will figure it out quicker than I expect. But yeah.
Any other questions? There's no questions online, but if anyone online wants to come off mute or type a question. There's nothing. Thank you very much, Greg. Amazing job.